So your task this week is to write your own segment that you can imagine appearing on the Anthropocene Reviewed. So you're trying to capture the spirit of John Green's podcast, but in your own words and with your own stories. So what I've done to try and help motivate you this week is I've done a quick kind of roundup of the ideas I saw you posted the most in your discussion last week when you were sort of analyzing what's going on in that podcast. So let's just take a quick look at what you came up with. Okay, please enjoy my tiny head. All right, so looking here at what we've got in front of us. The feeling of the podcast is that it definitely is something scripted. So he is reading, yet it's conversational. So the vocabulary feels very natural, and the tone feels as though he's really just talking to the listeners. We noted also that he is serious, yet he's also lighthearted. So this is not a real downer of a podcast, but it is one where you end up feeling like there was some impact. And sometimes some of the ideas will really stick with you. So there is a level of seriousness as well. As we also noted that it's educational because there's a lot of facts and history. So every time I listen to an episode of the Anthropocene Reviewed, I end up learning something. So there's a little bit of research, and he really entwines facts with that feeling of personal stories as well. So look into the history of whatever topic you end up choosing, find some facts. You get to intersperse those throughout your segment that you write. A lot of people noted that he does bring in personal stories. So he shares vulnerability, and that helps create connection. So he's candid and he's intimate. In the geese episode that some of you listened to, he brings in that story about this past girlfriend from, earlier in his life. And that is, there's a little bit confessional about it. And then he ends up tying her to the geese, which is kind of a nice move on his part. He does bring in subtle deadpan humor. He's got some really good one-liners. And I think deadpan is something that some of you also called kind of monotone. So he's not, there aren't screeching car crash noises in this podcast. And there's no wah-wah to it either. He really is a mature adult speaking into the microphone as he's recording it. But also, this guy is smart. And he has a good sense of humor. So a little bit wry, a little bit dry. The way he reads is gentle, no shouting. It's a safe place, this podcast. It's gentle, matter-of-fact reading, almost monotone, but he does have inflection for emphasis. So I don't feel like this is a robot reading to me, and I don't feel like this is someone without emotion reading to me. He's very emotional, but he's very level as well in the way that he reads. And a lot of you noticed that really it's easy to follow his content is because he uses simple, direct vocabulary choices. So somehow, by using very simple words, he does manage to convey quite a bit of intelligence, doesn't he? So just don't fool yourself into thinking sounding smart means you use big fancy words. You can use quite direct language and still have thoughts that are complex. Someone noticed that he pauses after important points. Like he really does leave some moments for the big points to hang. So when you are writing and then recording your own segment, consider that. So don't get, sometimes you get a little nervous and you're a little like, I'm performing, I got to blah, 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 blah. No, chill, babies, chills. So you can just have your big moment and allow a little dead space because it lets the moment land. You guys notice that the writing is beautifully descriptive. So if he's writing about a sycamore tree, if he's writing about a sunset, if he's writing about a song, he really is creating images. There's something almost cinematic about his descriptive writing. Like I really feel like I can picture the things that he's describing. Clearly, when I picture things, I have to close my eyes. This is me picturing. Yeah. So he's beautifully descriptive. He does present himself as intelligent, and in turn, that asks his listeners to be intelligent. So this is not a dumb podcast, and it works from the presumption that if you're listening to it and following along, you too are not dumb. And isn't intelligence refreshing? His content and his tone are poignant even. I mean, I have to say, more than once I've gotten teary-eyed listening, especially as he sums things up at the end. I get a little heart swoopy sometimes. So he is poignant. And some of his analyses and topics make listeners misty-eyed. Bring a tissue. He connects history to current times. So the idea of connection has come up more than once, hasn't it? He connects the facts and the history that he finds to what's going on now. So he applies it to humanity as we are now, looking at who we have been in the past. And he invites us down a rabbit hole with him. I think if anything sums up this podcast, that's it. This is one man's brain. He's chosen something that interests him, something that he has some personal experience with, and then he starts to look into the different facets of it and try and make this connection to this, and then to his own life. And really, as you're listening, you end up feeling like, wow, we're doing a dive here, aren't we? Okay, let's go. His listeners feel united and validated. I like that point. I think that's very true. And again, that comes from presenting intelligence that treats your listeners as though they are ready to receive your intelligence. And it brings everyone together. Every episode reminds us the small, seemingly insignificant aspects of our lives are part of what makes us human. That too sums up what the entire podcast really is about. It's the little stuff that makes us perfectly weird, right? We're all just a bunch of weirdo skin sacks, but it's our love of llama farms and Twizzlers that brings us all together. And I like that particular criteria. Well done. He gives context to the topic by bringing in personal stories. So there's a lot of, I remember one time when I was in college, or when I was a kid, we used to do this. So when you are writing your own segment, you've got your topic, you'll do some history, you'll get some facts, but it needs to be a topic where you have a story that you can tell, a little anecdote that you can tell. So if I chose to write about kombucha, which is one of the great loves of my life, I maybe would talk about how when I first started to get to know my friend Krista, it actually was through social media. So she was an online friend before a face-to-face friend. And I would notice on her Instagram, she was always posting pictures of the kombucha she was making at home and like what flavor. And then her little daughter would, try it too. And they do kind of like a review of like, good flavor, mom, or like, no more mint. And I watched that from afar because I didn't really know this friend yet. I watched it from afar, and she felt sort of glamorous to me. Mind you, I'm a cheap date, doesn't take much. But I would think, wow, she makes her own kombucha. Wow. And she would sort of describe, how it tasted and everything. And I think if I were doing a segment of the Anthropocene Reviewed, I would maybe talk about that feeling of making a new friend through observing her love of something that I love too, this kombucha thing. But I would also bring in the idea of effervescence, because Krista is a real bubbly, as she says, I have a big dumb laugh. She really does. And so, I feel lighter around her. And also I think she sees a certain kind of effervescence in me too. So we're sort of like kombucha sisters, like, figuratively in a way. So, you can tie in that kind of stuff, but I would definitely think like, what topic out of all, I'm looking at these 5, I can't decide. Well, what one do I have like a good story that I can connect some things with? Go with that topic, okay? Also, we notice random topics are put together. So I do like the fact that sometimes his segments feel like mashups a little bit. Number one, just the mashup between who he appears to be. He's very much a well-known, best-selling author, and we've agreed he comes across as intelligent, but then he writes this whole segment one time on Diet Dr. Pepper, and he's kind of obsessed with Diet Dr. Pepper. He knows it's bad for him. He also knows there are a lot of things he likes to do that would be worse for him. So Diet Dr. Pepper, in fact, is a pretty safe joy or moment of celebration when he has one. We don't necessarily expect something that's kind of crappy like Diet Dr. Pepper. Mind you, I enjoy one myself. But we don't expect that from a guy who seems like, oh, he's an author and he's so smart. And so there's a little bit of a mashup there that's seemingly kind of like, oh, these two random things, did not expect this guy to be talking about that. There's some power in that. And then I would say overall, what we see throughout that entire podcast, we see stories and a tone and information very realistic. but it always is optimistic. Again, this is not a podcast that weighs down the listeners. This is a podcast where at the end you feel a little, yes, thank you, John Green. It's a very positive podcast without being sappy or saccharine. So all you have to do are those, whatever, 18, I haven't counted them, those things listed there. Just do those. It's easy, right? Yeah. But I'm saying, I really do want you to think, first choose a good topic for you. Choose something you can find historical information about, but also where you have a personal story that you can weave in. And remember that this doesn't have to be all fireworks. This can be a very quiet, gentle, heartfelt piece of writing, and also a little goofy, a little funny. So I know you have to try and find your own voice within these parameters, and that's part of the challenge for you. But I hope that even, to be honest, even if the segment you end up writing is kind of ho-hum, like you realize, well, I didn't quite hit the mark, and I read it and I try and think of super nice ways to be kind to you, but I'm thinking, even if that happens, the assignment can be a success just by pushing yourself to write something and in a way and for a purpose that you wouldn't otherwise tackle normally. That right there, that's the growth moment. That's the learning moment. So just keep in mind that even if you're like, I'm terrible at this, this thing sucks. In fact, that's not a failure. We're looking at the journey. Yeah. Anyhow, so you should spend the week writing. You're going to get your segment posted, and then you're still going to have time once you get some feedback on it. You're going to have time to revise it and kind of circle back. If it's really disastrous and you're feeling terrible about it, revision for you could be, I'm tossing that thing. I'm starting over. You had the test run and I was like, that was disastrous. So you always, if it's really bad, you can choose a different topic and give it another whirl. I really just want you to try out something you haven't done before. And keep in mind, too, it's something you're going to read aloud, or you're going to beg a friend or family member to read aloud. And you're going to try and record it if you have the means. And so you're also trying to write something that will appeal to the ears and that will make sense out in the world. And lots of times when you do writing, especially for college classes, it's something you write just for the teacher to look at, maybe a couple classmates, and you don't have to go through that feeling of like, I'm actually publishing something that could be heard and absorbed by the world out there. So think of it that way too. I mean, just to add a little extra pressure before I say bye.